Present.
No.
Yes. You are funny.
Are we ready? Pardon?
It's not 6:30 yet.
The item.
Well, you have 2 minutes past this. Okay, past the 6:25.
You can tell me.
I thought you were at 6:30. This is an Apple Watch.
Order the meeting of Monday, December 12th, 2022. This meeting is a meeting of the Board of Education in public for the purpose of conducting the school district's business and is not to be considered a public community meeting. There is a time for public participation during the regular meeting. Mrs. Petter, would you please do the roll call?
Mrs. Wyder,
Here?
Mr. Simons,
Present.
Mrs. Cleveland,
Here?
Mrs. Moore,
Here?
Mrs. Kessler.
Here.
Thank you. We will now stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The next item is approval or revision of the agenda. Are there any revisions? Then we need a motion for approval.
Second.
Who was the motion? John, okay.
Is there a second?
Second.
Mrs. Petter?
Mr. Simons,
Yes.
Mrs. Cleveland,
Yes.
Mrs. Moore,
Yes.
Mrs. Kessler,
Yes.
Mrs. Wyder.
Yes. Thank you. Next is the inspirational message from the Princeton Innovation Center. The change starts here with me.
Thank you very much, President Wyder.
I'm going to call up Chris Rojas, who's our amazing principal of the Innovation Center. The Innovation Center, for those that either need a reminder or don't know, was something that was created just over 5 years ago, and it has been unbelievable. One of our jewels in this school. It's totally inclusionary and really does a wonderful job under the leadership of Chris Rojas. We've hosted, I don't know, Chris, what, about 6 to 8 school districts over the course of the last several years, looking specifically at programming. And this is something that, again, something we should be very, very proud of. This is about innovation. It is something, again, that has been seen as something that schools want to emulate. Ms. Rojas.
Thank you, sir. I want to thank, first of all, the Board of Education and Mr. Burton, and then all of the CIA team that is here, as well as the rest of the Princeton family for letting us speak tonight. So we're going to do what we always do in education, is pivot a little bit, because we have a few students that, I guess, came down with something. So it's going to be a little different than we had anticipated. But here's what I'd like everybody to do right now. Some of you may not have even heard of Princeton Innovation Center before. Some of you may have heard of it. But if I want you right now, when I say Princeton Innovation Center, to think of what word or words come first.
Alternative.
Alternative.
Opportunities?
Opportunities. Whatever.
Creative, innovative.
Creative and innovative. For me, that word is always kids. So at that time, and I'll circle back, but I'm going to let the floor to two of our all-stars that are going to tell you a little bit about how the change starts here with me at the Innovation Center. Brooklyn? You got this, kiddo.
The Innovation Center has been a big help with me. I recently moved, and I thought I wasn't going to be able to go to the school anymore, but they were able to get transportation through UTS and be able to have me in the morning classes with all my friends, and they're just very helpful with that and understanding. What I like about the classes are the teachers are very helpful, and the classes are more small, and I'm able to focus and stay focused there with it. We have a intro to industry class where we build things and learn things in the construction field and with the safety of it. I love the building and construction, and it's one of my career choices for my future, so they've been a big help with that, and I'm able to get an internship with it, and I already turned in my application for it. There's also a 3D printing class that we do on Wednesdays, and I've made snowflakes and a shoe project. There's just so many things that are cool about it, so that's what I think of for the Innovation Center.
What else is up here? Tell 'em what-
I built this lamp in the Intro to Industry class. It was really fun and cool to do. So,
Thank you.
Good job.
And our next student is Wilbur. He's going to read first in Spanish, then in English.
Yo, Wilber López, me he esforzado mucho en dar lo mejor de mí en la escuela, desde en hacer mis tareas y también trabajado sobre mi salud. Me ha costado mucho aceptarme. Pensé que al llegar por primera vez al Innovation Center sufriría los mismos abusos físicos que sufriría en otra escuela. Siempre me ha gustado estudiar, pero en sí estaba ansioso de entrar por primera vez en esta escuela. Por otra parte, tenía miedo de que opinaran de mí, pero al estar en Princeton me sentí seguro. Estando adentro me empezaron a tratar bien. Siempre he sufrido mucho de depresión. Princeton me ha brindado apoyo desde el primer año que estuve aquí. Como estudiante de Princeton de Innovation Center, digo que estoy orgulloso de estar aquí y me siento seguro. Me ha ayudado a descubrir quién soy y cuáles son mis talentos. Gay, homosexual, puede ser una palabra muy rara para muchos y para otros es un nombre que nos distingue. Esta escuela me ha apoyado, me ha dado de qué hablar y me ha demostrado cuáles son mis derechos. Sí, soy homosexual y no tengo miedo de llegar en la escuela y ser discriminado, ya sea por la forma de cómo me visto, camine, actúe o hable. Mis maestros me han enseñado cuáles son todos mis derechos, estando en la escuela y estando afuera. Sentía que tenía miedo que me hicieran bullying y me pegaran, pero cuando supe mis derechos y quién era en realidad, me siento seguro viniendo todos los días aquí. Sí, he sufrido mucho de depresión y cuando le prestas atención a eso te deprime mucho y tu autoestima baja. Yo lo he superado y no fue fácil. Si no hablas hoy, nadie más hablará por ti. Siempre te encontrarás con tus profesores de confianza o consejero escolar. Siempre habrá alguien en la escuela de confianza y si te trata de tu salud mental, es más importante. No tengas miedo al venir aquí. Nadie puede discriminarte. Siéntate seguro de llegar a Innovation Center como yo lo hago. Sé que los valores comienzan desde casa, pero en la escuela me instruyen más. Gracias Princeton por brindarme mucho apoyo y esto va para los que aún tienen miedo. En esta escuela no discriminan a nadie por su color, cultura y por su orientación sexual. Puede ser gay, bisexual, heterosexual o algo más. Aún así, esta escuela te demuestra seguridad y te apoya. Yo estudio en Princeton Innovation Center y me siento orgulloso de estudiar aquí. Los estudiantes de aquí me han tratado bien y también tengo amigos. Nosotros siempre nos apoyamos, no nos distinguimos por nuestra cultura, color, género o por el idioma, sino por el respeto y la tolerancia que nos tenemos los unos a los otros. Juntos seguimos aprendiendo inglés y varias materias necesarias para tener éxito en la vida. Mis padres no pudieron estudiar, pero yo sí. El cambio comienza conmigo. Me aseguraré de aprovechar las oportunidades de Princeton Innovation Center me ha dado para mejorar nuestras vidas. I, Wilbur, I have worked hard to my best at school, from doing my homework to working in my heart. I have thought a hard time accepting myself. I thought that when I first arrived to the Innovation Center, I would suffer the same physical abuse that I suffered at another school. I have always liked student, but I was so anxious to enter this school for the first time. On the other hand, I was afraid of what they would think of me, but being Princeton, I felt safe being here. They began to treat me well and help me through an emotional time. I have always suffered a lot from depression, but Princeton has supported me since my first year here. As a student at Princeton Innovation Center, I say that I'm proud to be here and I feel safe. They have helped me discover who I am and who are my talents. Gay or homosexual could be a very strong word for many, especially those of us in patriarchal cultures. For others, it is a name that distinguishes us. An integral part of us this school has supported me, has given me something to talk about, and has shown me what my rights are. I am gay, and I'm not afraid to arriving at the school and begin discriminated against. Be it by the way I dress, talk, act. My teacher have told me what all my rights are in school, and so began outside of it. I beaten that I was afraid of being bullied and beaten. However, I feel safe coming here every day, thanks to my teacher and friends. Yes, I have suffered a lot from depression, and I want to pay attention to it. Depression, you allot and your self-esteem goes down. I have overcome most of it, and it was not easy. If you don't speak today, no one else will speak for you. You will always have your trusted teacher or school counselor. Talk to them for mental health. There will always be someone at the school you can trust, and if dealing with your mental health is more important, then you don't be afraid to come here. No one can discriminate against you. Please safe to arrive at the Innovation Center as I do. I know that values start at home, but at school they instill me more in me. Thank you, Princeton, for giving me a lot of support, and this goes to those who are still afraid. In this school, they do not discriminate against anyone because of their color, culture, sexual orientation. This school is safe and support you. I study at the Princeton Innovation Center, and I'm proud to study here. The students here have treated me well, and I also have friends. We always support each other. We do not distinguish ourselves by culture, color, gender, language, but the way respect the tolerance that we each for other. Together, we continue to learn English and various subjects necessary to success in my life. My parents couldn't study, but I change start with me, and I will make sure to take advantage of the opportunities that the Princeton Innovation Center has given me to improve our lives. Thank you.
Good job.
We have great kids. When I ask you what to think of, when I think of Princeton Innovation Center, it's always the kids. I do want to say, I want to thank the board for your support. When we talked about the change starts here, about 2 years ago, almost exactly to this date, I was given an opportunity to reimagine what an education for all students could be. And since then, we have put together an amazing team, myself, Kyle Jepson, my incredible assistant principal, and one of the most amazing faculties that you could have. Our kids get to do really incredible things that people don't even know about. We have students that are creating their own video games. We have students that have made mazes and then programmed the robots to go through the mazes. We have had students that brought their emotions to life in the form of art and painting. We've had students that have thought of an idea, designed it on the computer, and then printed it out. We have had students that have interviewed each other, supported each other, got to know each other, and made it into a podcast. So when we talk about our students, we want to reimagine the possibilities of what education can be. And with your support, we truly have done that. So thank you all for being a support and a resource for the Princeton Innovation Center. At this time, we do have, if I could call my two students, and Shelby, come up here too. If you guys could pass something out to the Board of Education. This is a little something that in their 3D printing class they've made for you. So please choose, we have voice and choice, please choose what you would like. Come on up, guys.
Ms. Rojas, can you talk about what's being passed out?
Sure. So the students, one of their last projects that they've been working on are making ornaments. And so all of these ornaments were designed by freehand on the computer with the students and then printed out on the 3D printers that we were able to purchase. So, Mr. Burton, you get one too.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you all. And again, we really appreciate all the support that you've given us. And as always, go Vikes.
There you go. Ms. Swider, I just have a couple statistics too about the Innovation Center. One of the things, the big goal is personalization. That's really what it was. When you look specifically at reimagining, as Chris Rojas talked about, we really wanted to make sure that we had opportunities for kids. You know, we know that curriculum, typically there's a start point and an end point in education, but sometimes students are ready to move at a faster pace. So we do have several students that graduate early. In fact, one young man graduated in October and took part the very next day in a great work ethic license advisory meeting and did a phenomenal job. But I wanted to share this real quick. So we had 62 students that participated from the Innovation Center in a manufacturing lunch and learn program. We have over 82 students that are FEMA certified, which includes CPR, first aid, and stop the bleed modules. We also have 52 that are construction, architecture, drawing certification, which is amazing. Additionally, we had over 400 students participate in the business breakfast so far. And with the workforce hiring program, we have 47 students in the new hire internship program. And when we talk to businesses around the area and through the tri-state region, that's the number one thing they're very concerned about is the workforce gap. So I'm very proud that the Innovation Center is playing an integral part in that, as well as the highest level of personalization. It shouldn't be about how much time, it should be about ability level and where students are. So Chris, on behalf of everybody here, thank you so much for the great work that you do, and Kyle and all the staff and faculty. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Burton. Next is recognition of visitors. Do we have any? All right. Then we will move on to recognition of Eagle Scouts.
Thank you, Mrs. Wider. On top of Eagle Scouts, we have a lot going on tonight. So one of the things that found out very early in my tenure here was how active the Boy Scouts were and how many Eagle Scouts that we have year over year over year. So I'd like to call the Eagle Scouts up and stay in this order if you don't mind. And then we're going to talk a little bit about each one of you. We're going to give you a certificate, and then we're going to take a picture of you with the Board of Education. So Jordan Franklin coming up here. Thanks, Jordan. We're going to talk about you in a second. Ian Jackson, Nathan Young, Declan McGrath, and Stephen Higgins. So to become an Eagle Scout is a very arduous process. It is not something that is easy to do. And at one point, I remember a statistic with the amount of students that or young men that start in Boy Scouts and actually matriculate up to be an Eagle Scout, it is minuscule, so we certainly appreciate that. But Jordan's project was a construction of a donation box for worn, used, tattered U.S. flags. When completed, it was placed at the Sharonville Recreation Center for public use. He also conducted a U.S. flag retirement ceremony with the Association of the Knights of Columbus. The overall project was completed not too long ago, in September. Thank you, Jordan. You could step on up. Ian Jackson, and Jordan is a senior at Scarlet Oaks. Ian Jackson is also a senior at Scarlet Oaks. He's actually studying residential and commercial electricity, and after high school plans to enlist in the Navy, so thank you very much for your service, Ian. In conjunction with the City of Springdale 2022 Bike and Pedestrian Connectivity Plan, Ian raised funds, purchased and installed an outdoor commercial-grade bicycle tire pump at the Springdale Community Park. The bike pump will serve the community and connect all those who wish to visit the City of Springdale, the park system, and the community center. And Ian raised over $1,200 to get this done by mulching flower beds this past summer to make this project possible. Ian, if you could step up, thank you. Nathan Young. Nathan Young's project was installing a Gaga ball pit, which is at Heritage Hill, which is sweeping the country. If you're not aware of that, that's something that just about every elementary school certainly has right now. He completed the project in April of 2022. Actually had an opportunity to be there, so that was great. He earned the rank of Eagle Scout August 4th, 2022. Gaga ball was invented in Israel in the mid-20th century and is spread across the world as a popular game at many summer camps. Springdale is one of the first schools in the Cincinnati area to have a Gaga pit because of Nathan's selfless work. Thank you, Nathan. And Declan McGrath, that's a name you should remember. We actually recognized Declan, but he could not be here. But Declan, he actually was recognized almost a year ago, but was unable to attend. He was also featured on the Viking Voices program, so check that out, a little selfless plug. If you haven't seen that on cable, Viking Voices, the people of Princeton, is available 4 to 6 times a month on your favorite ICRC radio station. But Declan did the dugouts at the village of Evendale and completed that in June of 2021 and is the youngest known to me Eagle Scout. So he achieved that in 9th grade. Stephen Higgins, Stephen also did a Gaga pit at Springdale Elementary School. I actually happened to be there as well, and that was unbelievable. Stephen completed the Eagle Scout project by fundraising in excess of $1,500. So it's not just about the work in and of itself, it's a whole service project which makes the work that these young men have done so amazing. And Stephen, again, we know that at Springdale Elementary School, they're certainly loving that Gaga pit as they are at Heritage Hill. So if you can, let's have the Board of Education coming up, and we'll take a picture with these fine young men. Give them a big round of applause. We're going to call up a bunch of all-state people in water polo right now, and we're going to recognize them. I'm going to talk a little bit about each team, but first let me call up these all-state athletes. Jack McDaniel, Carson McDaniel, Matthew Hardman, Ava Sharpshire, Carly Nagel, Trevor Ellerding, and Bree Good. You know, for those people that don't know water polo, I used to think that the hardest sport to play in was wrestling, or to participate in. Wrestling was so grueling. And then I realized that what would make wrestling harder is actually if wrestling was done in the water, which apparently is what happens, huh, Carson? Underneath the water, there's all kinds of stuff And Carly, they wrap their legs around, I don't know it's almost like legalized trying to drown people. It's crazy. But the sport is very, very difficult to play. And I have to tell you this, that being a fan of water polo, it's something that is absolutely amazing to watch. It's literally like as aggressive as it is, moving the ball around and how they swim and pass the ball, just absolutely incredible. On top of all these all-state athletes, and they all earned a variety of different levels. Jack McDaniel was once again the goalie of the year in the state of Ohio, so congratulations, Jack. That's awesome. And so the future is very bright for water polo. We do have two youngsters up there, if you will, Matthew Hardman and Trevor Ellerding for the boys. And we know that Carly, is this it for you? You have one more year? Yes. And so we know that it's bright, right? We also know, too, that Coach Tremaris, who's a longtime coach, also was recognized in the state of Ohio for all the great service he did. He is retiring this year officially, and so we wish him the best. But if the board, if we can come on up here, we'll take a picture of all these all-state water polo athletes. And as they leave the stage, I did want to quick correction. Bree Good. I keep trying to make Bree a senior, but Bree's a junior as well. So again, they're going to be a powerhouse next year. The girls and the boys finished 4th in the state this year, and look to add to that next year. So again, one more big round of applause for water polo all-state athletes. We're going to call up to stage the football, these unbelievable athletes, but they cannot play water polo. I'm just going to be honest with you, fellas. That's a hard sport as football, but you couldn't play water polo. So we have some specific awards. We have one first-team All-State, Philip Daniels. He's going to come up here. I'll talk about him in a second. Caleb Clark Glover is second team, as is Breon Ishmael, second team, and R.J. West, honorable mention. So, gentlemen, if you can come on up here, we'll talk about you. So, Philip, sure, that'd be fine. Thanks, Breon. This is not Philip, though. The next gentleman is Philip, but that's okay, Breon. You're ready for the show. All right, so Philip, what a wonderful young man. All these, just like water polo, just like the Eagle Scouts, we're blessed to have wonderful, wonderful students here, and there's no doubt that Philip is one of these ones as well. First team All-Ohio, anchored the strong offensive line that generated 365 yards a game and 32.6 points a game. When he needed a first down, there was no question if we were running the ball where we were going behind. Philip Daniels He's going to continue to play football. He's a great young man, and we were excited to have him join the Vikings. Now let's have Caleb Clark Glover up here. He's second team. Phillips, stay up here too. Okay. So Caleb Clark Glover, second team, finished the senior year with 32 tackles. And if you got hit by him, you certainly knew you got hit by him. In fact, his dad and I were talking about how he closes, and we like defensive backs that close and hit people hard, which he certainly did. He had 9 pass deflections, defensive back. He averaged 20 yards per punt in punt return. That's amazing. That is a huge, huge number, as well as 21 yards for kickoff return. He also is going to continue his football career. We're excited to hear about what's going to happen with you. And you're actually going to enroll. This is maybe your last event here at Princeton. He's going to start college next month. So we really appreciate Caleb Clark. Breon, if you can come up here, second team All-Ohio. Just like these two young men and the last one you're going to meet here, Breon is a great young man, recorded 64 tackles, 10.5 tackles for loss, 3.5 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, 3 fumble recoveries. He had 2 interceptions, including a touchdown at the linebacker position. And I was looking, he can't be that perfect, but I found a flaw. I found a flaw, Breon. You know what that flaw is? OH, baby. Oh, no. Breon is going to go to Michigan. Actually excited about that. He's going to continue with his college career, the second best team in the Big Ten. Although they sure whooped Ohio State this year. Hopefully we'll see you again in the championship. And last, certainly not least, R.J. West, honorable mention, All-Ohio. I tell you, he was the conductor of that offense that certainly did a great job. Threw for almost 1,700 yards, 17 touchdowns, rushed for another 10, and 638 yards on the ground. He's going to continue his football career as well. Regardless of wherever these gentlemen go, we know that you guys are going to make a big mark. And the best thing about these kids, like water polo and Eagle Scouts, is they're way better kids and way better young adults than they are athletes. And that's the one thing we should be very, very proud of. Board of Education, let's take a picture of these fine young men. And last but not least, obviously it takes a coach to make all this stuff happen. I'm going to call up Coach Andre Parker. Coach Parker coming up here. So as Coach Parker comes up here, if you ever talk to Andre Parker, you will see that he is such a humble man. And he doesn't fill the words with a ton of, or fill the air with a ton of words, but when he does speak, he's like E.F. Hutton, and everybody listens. The gentleman here, you saw that they were very, very humble. And that, I think, Andre, is one of the things I hear over and over and over about you is your humility. And that's one of the many reasons why you won the Paul Brown Coaching Award and was recognized yesterday at the Cincinnati Bengals game when they just barely beat the Cleveland Browns. It's the first time in a long time. I mean, it's nice that the Browns allowed the Bengals to win every once in a while. But let me talk a little bit about Andre here. The head coach of Princeton was a winner of the Paul Brown Excellence in Coaching Award. The Paul Brown Excellent Coaching Award has been given annually by the Bengals since 2002. It honors outstanding high school football coaches in the region and includes a $10,000 donation to the Princeton High School Athletic Department. The Bengals honored Coach Parker on the field during yesterday's game. In addition to receiving the Paul Brown Excellence in Coaching Award, Coach Parker is the Bengals nominee for the Don Shula NFL High School Football Coach of the Year Award. And Coach, I don't know if you knew that or not, but it's certainly an honor that you're there. The NFL's Don Shula NFL High School Coach of the Year Award honors high school football coaches that demonstrate the integrity, achievement, and leadership exemplified by the winningest coach in NFL history, Don Shula. Each of the 32 NFL teams nominate a coach from their respective market. There's a lot of accolades, but to me, I just want to go back one more time, Coach, because I know that this will ring true to you. The reason why he got this award is because of integrity, because of achievement, and because of leadership. Those three words ring true, and I know, Coach, you take great pride in the gentlemen that you coach, as well as unbelievable coaching staff and being able to work with a wonderful athletic department. Let's take a photo now with Coach Parker. This is always a time for those people. Wait, you're more than welcome to stay if you want for the next couple hours, but you probably have finals. You guys go study.
Next is the consent agenda. Is there a motion?
Second.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll second. Mrs.
I think she already seconded.
Oh, I didn't hear it. I'm sorry. Mrs. Petter?
Mrs. Cleveland,
Yes.
Mrs. Moore,
Yes.
Mrs. Kessler,
Yes.
Mrs. Wyder,
Yes.
Mr. Simons,
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes. Next is district business. The approval of the October 2022 financial report.
I move to approve the October 2022 financial report as presented.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded. Mrs. Petter?
you have multiple attachments in board docs. I do want to make you aware that you have one at your table. It is the reconciliation and the investment reports. That was not included in your packet on Friday. Wanted to make sure you had a hard copy of that. The other items are, of course, the 018 donation fund report. At this time, we're still just reporting revenue. There has been no expense from that fund at this time. We have the updated ESSER grant spending report. We're now down to ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 funding, so that makes this report a little tidier and easier to read. We are doing very well on ESSER 2 spending or encumbered. We are at 96.9% spent or encumbered on ESSER 2. That was the 6.1 million. ESSER 3, we are at 46.3% spent or encumbered at this time, and that was the 13.8 million. So we are doing very good job using these funds. We'll continue to move forward. ESSER 2 must be spent out by the end of September. Okay, that's our next big deadline. You also have the credit card report, which shows those expenses. That's required by the auditors, that you receive that every month. And then you have the monthly financial detail report. I do want to remind the board that this is October, so this does not include the final numbers when we're doing some of the total number comparisons. So that will be tidied up when you see the November report. Other than that, revenue is very right on as you compare what we received last October at this time. Expenses also are running well in line at the end of October. There was nothing to report to the board that was anything other than we were expecting at this time. January, we hope to catch you up and that we will have both the December and the January. We're hoping that our closing gets faster and faster as the new assistant treasurer is getting used to her new position, but it's going very well.
Okay. Is there any discussion about that?
Mrs. Moore?
Yes.
Mrs. Kessler? Mrs. Wider?
Yes.
Mr. Simons? Yes. Mrs. Cleveland?
Yes.
Thank you. Next is approval of the Delta Dental contract effective January 2023 through December 2023.
I move to approve the Delta Dental renewal contract effective January 1st, 2023 through December 31st, 2023.
It has been moved and seconded. Mrs. Petter?
This is our annual contract. Delta Dental still providing the best price point for us for our dental insurance. In fact, this year is a 5% reduction coming up next year. Very good news.
Good.
Any questions? Mrs. Petter?
Mrs. Kessler?
Yes.
Mrs. Wider?
Yes.
Mr. Simons?
Yes.
Mrs. Cleveland?
Yes.
Mrs. Moore?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes. Next is approval of renewal of UMR flexible spending as it relates to benefits.
I move to approve UMR flexible spending as it relates to benefits renewal effective January 1, 2023 through December 31, 2023.
It has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion?
This is the same plan that we've had before. This allows our employees to put a little money pre-tax aside to use for medical, dental, and vision expenses.
Is that flexible spending account set up in such a way that it's sort of like a credit card or something that they can use?
If we don't have plastic, our people do have to turn in receipts. If it is an expense that is directly related to your health benefit, that automatically is forwarded, say a copay, you automatically receive that money. But anything outside UMR expenses, they fill out a form, submit the receipt.
Yeah, we used to have to do that. When they gave us cards, it was so much easier. You just,
Yes.
okay. Thank you.
Anything else?
Mrs. Wider?
Yes.
Mr. Simons? Yes. Mrs. Cleveland? Yes. Mrs. Moore?
Yes.
Mrs. Kessler?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes. Next is approval of the renewal of the stop-loss carrier as it relates to benefits.
I move to approve the renewal of Sun Life as Princeton City Schools stop-loss carrier as it relates to benefits effective January 1st, 2023.
It has been moved and seconded. Mrs. Petter?
Stop-loss insurance is a requirement of our self-insured medical plan. We are seeing a slight increase in this. We've had some high claims that we're dealing with it. Again, that's always very cyclical. You have good years and you have bad years. We've had several very, very good years, and this current year is just a little hiccup. We'll be back in the good after that.
Anything else?
Mr. Simons?
Yes.
Mrs. Cleveland?
Yes.
Mrs. Moore?
Yes.
Mrs. Kessler?
Yes.
Mrs. Wyder?
Yes. Thank you. Next is approval of memorandum of understanding with Mount St. Joseph University. Is there any explanation to go with that?
Motion?
I move to approve the memorandum of understanding with Mount St. Joseph University as presented.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded. Mrs. Petter?
Mrs. Cleveland?
Yes.
Mrs. Moore?
Yes.
Mrs. Kessler?
Yes.
Mrs. Wyder?
Yes.
Mr. Simons?
Thank you. Motion passes. Next is approval of agreement with Be Able, I think I'm saying that correctly, World of Work.
I move to approve the agreement with Be Able or Be Able as presented.
Second.
Any discussion?
Yes, there is. Excuse me. When we look to the future for our students, for each and every one of our students, we need to know not only their name, but their story, their strengths and interests. Be Able World of Work allows us to do that. On top of that, so students will participate in some surveying that will go out, and then based upon what they score in terms based on interests and strengths, this Be Able World of Work mechanism will be able to send specific interest-related articles to students to be able to kind of build upon that, build upon the interest and build upon the strength. It's a wonderful program. This is something that, quite frankly, is long overdue at Princeton. As we move forward with education, we have to know students at a deeper level. We know what happened over the last couple of years, and for us to really take one more step forward, we have to have these conversations with students about their strengths and their interests, and this is one vehicle that's going to allow us to do so.
Anything else? Mrs. Petter? Oh,
Mrs. Moore?
wait a minute.
I'm searching for the cost, I didn't quite see it.
I believe it's $224,000 over the course of several years, and on top of that, we received a very large donation to be able to help offset the cost of this program. We received a donation of $100,000. So we're looking right now at ascertaining, and we just had a meeting today specifically about ESSER funds. So we're looking at this contract with where all that money's going to come out of. Obviously, this is something that fits specifically in ESSER, but because of when ESSER runs out, we wouldn't be able to pay for the whole thing. But we're going to look at it out of title funds as well as this large donation and ESSER or ARP funds.
Now, when we receive this feedback, does that go to counselors? Does that go to the central office? Who does that go to?
So that will go to students, but it will also our counselors would have access to that, and it specifically will, again, the big power of this whole thing is what happens after the students do the surveys. The strength's one thing, but when they look at the interest survey, that will tailor-make specific information that kids are interested in that they will get. It also looks at reading levels and Lexile scores, so it will tailor this program for students, and we have seen already when we did a pilot that based upon how kids participated in it, how many sessions that they had, we saw that reading scores increased. Mrs. Stiles, is that accurate? I don't know if there was anything else to add. Okay.
Anything else? Mrs. Petter?
Mrs. Moore?
Yes.
Mrs. Kessler?
Yes.
Mrs. Wyder?
Yes.
Mr. Simons?
Yes.
Mrs. Cleveland?
Yes.
Thank you, motion passes. Next is approval of service agreement with Apogee. I hope I said it correctly.
You did.
Thank you. Any discussion?
We need
You need a motion.
motion.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded.
So the only discussion that I have on this is, we've been exploring this for the last couple of years, this specific program. Our hands kind of got pushed on this when the old website system that we had, provider, actually got sold. So we don't know if price is going to go up. Typically, Mr. Lockhart, prices go up when they look at maybe not initially, but they always do. That actually happened with when this system was sold the last time we looked at Blackboard is what it was. So our old website provider got acquired by Blackboard, and now Blackboard, this division of it got sold. So we don't know, but this program does a lot of different things. The website, you will see the website look very, very, very clean moving up as we transition. On top of that, with the app, this is going to allow us for changes. It'll allow multiple users to be able to put accurate information on there very, very quickly. So if we know that there's some changes coming up, when you put it in one place, it'll go multiple places. And again, this is something that we looked at for a long time. It was a little bit cost prohibitive before, but now they've really kind of lowered the cost. There are many, many school districts in the state of Ohio, all across the country. I can't say if it's a #1 system that's used, but no matter where I'm at, everybody's talking about Apogee.
So are they redesigning the website or?
Yes, it'll be, well, when we use them, they have specific, they're like 5 or 6 sample websites that we've seen, and again, very, very clean. So the banner's really big. There's less buttons, but it's going to navigate you to the same place. It's going to be, we believe, a little bit more user-friendly for the end product, which are going to be obviously the community we serve, the parents, the grandparents, the students, and so forth, to be able to get to different places. And if you look at our website right now, which I think we've done a great job for what we had to use, but ultimately this is really going to provide a lot of behind-the-scenes work. That was one of the things actually Chris Lockhart was really, really concerned about, was as we transition. We looked at this in the very beginning of the year, but obviously beginning of the year is not. We looked at it beforehand, before that, but we weren't ready until we kind of got a little bit more comfortable. So we kind of pushed it down the road a little bit so where we could actually use some of our resources to help with the transition. And as we kind of negotiated more and more, we found out that they actually going to do a ton of the back end work, and their expertise is in marketing to make the websites really clean, the apps really clean, to be able to provide us as users and be able to, any changes, any modifications and all that stuff. It's really going to be a very simple process, where before it was a little bit more convoluted. And actually, it wasn't too long ago, we actually had to know code. So we don't need to know that now.
I guess for me, it was the navigation that was always kind of
A little chunky.
particularly with all the different schools almost having their own website, kind of. So they're going to be able to bring in the whole district, and the navigation should be clear.
Yeah, and Mary, when you're asking these questions, I'm thinking of a specific website, which is, again, I'm looking at, it's a big banner, and there's pictures that kind of scroll through like we have right now. But it'll say like school, it'll say departments, it'll say, again, very clean. And again, anymore, our community, they want technology that's going to be intuitive, and we feel that this is.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this. Yeah. Yeah.
Do we have a price tag on this?
Yes, the price tag, Chris Locke. Well, it's a little convoluted though, honestly, because they're going to buy out the remaining portion of the contract for Blackboard. But Chris is coming up here now. He could fill you in on that.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, so the price should have been included in the contract, yeah, for the exact amount.
The Apogee, part of the packet was in a different section. I had to pull it out. So there was a whole packet of Apogee stuff.
Oh.
Yeah, that included the negotiation with the legal team.
Ask the question, get the answer, and I'll go back and do my best.
Yeah, Mr. Burton has spoken really well of Apogee, but he actually left one part out. It also becomes our parent communication system. So it is really replacing everything that Blackboard was doing. So website, app, and parent and community communication, so the phone calls and the all calls, as well as giving teachers and building staff specific access to either their students in their classroom or the students in the school building, with everything being tracked within the app. So it's a way that they can communicate, that we have logs and we have records of those communications if we ever were to need them in the future.
Thank you, Chris. That actually was part of a conversation that we had last June.
Yes.
Specifically around that being able to, because every once in a while parents will say we didn't communicate. I don't know if you know that. Some of our colleagues out here, maybe school districts across the country, will say that sometimes parents will say that we didn't communicate, and this actually gives a great record of us. Not necessarily to say we got you, but just to kind of remind them what date we sent it, what time.
Yeah,
Thanks,
and
Chris.
to protect all parties around. So teachers can send a reminder to students that their homework is done. It needs to be turned in. And they're not using their own personal phones or text messages. They're using a school-sponsored and monitored form of communication to keep everyone safe.
That's good.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Burton.
Very welcome.
Mrs. Petter?
Mrs. Kessler,
Yes.
Mrs. Wyder,
Yes.
Mr. Simons,
Yes.
Mrs. Cleveland,
Yes.
Mrs. Moore,
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes. Next is approval of memorandum of understanding between Princeton City School District and the Sharonville Community Center.
I move to approve the memorandum of understanding between the Princeton City School District and the Sharonville Community Center as presented.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion?
No, this is just part of our safety plan.
Okay. Mrs. Petter?
Mrs. Wyder,
Yes.
Mr. Simons,
Yes.
Mrs. Cleveland,
Yes.
Mrs. Moore,
Yes.
Mrs. Kessler.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes. Next is approval of license agreement with the Village of Lincoln Heights.
I move to approve the license agreement with the Village of Lincoln Heights as presented.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded. Mrs. Petter?
What?
Oops.
Any discussion?
Is there discussion?
Section 9, page 6. Who is the actual licensor?
This is part, Mr. Fricky, this is part of the agreement that we had with them with Wi-Fi as well as the solar panel, part of the bigger project.
But who is the agreement with?
That's a good question.
Is it with Mr. Fricky, Mr.
No,
Burton,
no,
the
no.
Board of Education?
This is the Wi-Fi relay.
No, I understand
we have.
all of that. I'm just,
Yep.
it says.
It's with us and it's with the Princeton City School District and the Village of Lincoln Heights. That's the,
Yes.
yep.
In this section here, it says that the licensor is, it says attention
This is part of that bigger project where they're trying to get Wi-Fi all the way through Lincoln Heights, and because the school is so high, that'll allow it to be able to be a relay to be able to get to the areas that would not be able to get Wi-Fi connectivity.
So it's like they're renting our space or buying
Well,
the
the
space?
agreement, we're just saying they can put it up so that the relay can actually exist.
Is there a time limit, though? Does it ever end, the agreement, as to how long they can have that relay there?
Well, we would want to be supportive of the Village of Lincoln Heights to have connectivity all the way throughout. So as this point, no.
Let me rephrase my question. You're telling me that there's no deadline on the agreement, right?
As of right now, no.
Okay, thank you.
It's just an understanding. Because again, this is this huge project with the Village of Lincoln Heights. Remember, they had the community day with the Cincinnati Reds. They've had Hamilton County, the commissioners give money out of their budget specifically for Lincoln Heights. And trying to have connectivity can't happen in that district for all residents unless we have relays at the highest point in the district. So there's no higher point than the top of the elementary school at Lincoln Heights.
Are we doing this in other communities, neighborhoods within the district?
This is specifically part of the Lincoln Heights project. So if other communities have this project, I'm sure we'd be more than willing to help. But right now, all I know is that Lincoln Heights.
And so it's probably got Alta Fiber involved or some provider?
Yes, that would be through the Village of Lincoln Heights.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Petter?
Thank you, Mr. Burton.
Sure.
Mr. Simons?
Yes.
Mrs. Cleveland? Mrs. Moore?
Yes,
Mrs. Kessler?
Yes.
Mrs. Wyder?
Yes. Thank you. Motion passes. Next is approval of overnight field trip symphonic band and orchestra to Hawaii, February 14th, 2024.
I move to approve the overnight field trip of the symphonic band and orchestra to Hawaii, February 14, 2024, as presented. I hope they take more than 1 night.
And you might want to go as a chaperone.
Oh, yeah, I would do that.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded. Is there any other discussion?
Yes, actually, this is something a little bit different. So specifically, this is a great program. Unfortunately, COVID took away this opportunity for many of our students. So the last year's class, they would have had an opportunity to do this. They would have had an opportunity to go to Memphis. They would have had opportunity. So it's great to be able to bring this back. And so I see Kristen Brown, who's our great department chair of the music department, out there as well. And so this is wonderful. This is something that when we look at this and we look at overnight trips, we want to always make sure we get this on the board agenda on the front end. One item that you'll see coming up at the next meeting is going to be a track trip, which I'll talk about when that happens. But I did want to say this. I think this is very appropriate. So this just fresh off the docket, December 8th, Princeton City Schools is a 2023 Advocacy and Action Award recipient in the category of student recruitment, retention, and engagement through the national organization Music for All. Kristen put this together, so thank you so much for doing that application. But we'll be notified on the level of the award in January. So I don't know if we get any, hopefully we get thousands of dollars. That would be awesome. We'll find that out. But we could actually get honorable mention, bronze, silver, or gold, but we all know the only level that we believe that it is, and that's gold.
Yeah.
So thank you very much.
Congratulations on that. Thank you.
And when they've gone before, it has been absolutely splendiferous, I can tell you. So, do we need to vote on that, Mrs. Petter?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I was so wrapped
got
up in
excited
thinking
about
about Hawaii.
Mrs. Cleveland?
Yes.
Mrs. Moore?
Yes,
Mrs. Kessler?
Yes.
Mrs. Wyder?
Yes.
Mr. Simons?
Yes.
Thank you, motion passes. Next is to set the budget hearing, organizational meeting, and regular meeting date and time for the January 2023 meeting. Is there a suggested date?
What are the parameters, Madam Treasurer? That, the deadline we must do it
organize by January 15th.
by January 15th.
And when is our first scheduled board meeting?
Pardon?
When is our first scheduled board meeting in January?
We have no schedule at this time.
Okay, so do we want to have that prior to that meeting? Or do you want to have it
I think right after.
We typically have done the organizational meeting and followed it right up with the regular
The
meeting,
same day.
same night.
Oh, let's do it the same way. Why reinvent the wheel?
The date, so January 9th.
I mean, it's a long meeting, but I say,
January 9th? Okay.
I didn't understand why why it would be different.
Is that good with everybody?
Yes.
January 9th?
Is it usually like the half hour before the,
So in the past, we have had the tax budget hearing at 6:15, go right into the organizational meeting at 6:30. That's a very quick meeting. I mean, you're just,
Well, I thought
You're
you
just
had your
voting.
tax meeting at 6 o'clock.
we
Good.
sure can.
Okay.
So, we sure can. So we can do the tax budget hearing. You know, that takes 3 minutes.
Good.
And we could start the organizational meeting at 6:15. Go straight into the regular meeting.
don't our normal, okay. The
And the
regular meeting would
organizational
start at
meeting-
6:30, okay.
The organizational meeting is probably 10, 15 minutes. It's just a lot of roll calling.
Then I move to set the budget hearing, organizational meeting, and regular meeting date for January 9th, 2023, with the budget hearing to be held at 6:15 PM. The organizational meeting following at the budget hearing
At 6?
at 6 PM. The organizational meeting following at 6:15 PM, and the public session of the regular board meeting immediately following the organizational meeting.
I second that.
Okay, it has been moved and seconded. Mrs. Petter?
Mrs. Moore?
Yes.
Mrs. Kessler?
Yes.
Mrs. Wyder?
Yes.
Mr. Simons?
Yes.
Mrs. Cleveland?
Yes.
Thank you, motion passes. Next is appointment of a president pro tem for the 2023 organizational meeting.
I move that Susan Wider be the president pro tem for the 2023 organizational meeting.
Second?
Is there a second?
I said second.
Mary seconded. So, Mrs. Petter, would you call the roll?
Mrs. Kessler?
Yes.
Mrs. Wyder?
Yes.
Mr. Simons?
Yes.
Mrs. Cleveland?
Yes.
Mrs. Moore?
Yes.
Thank you. Next is the first reading of the 2023-2024 Polaris additions, modifications, deletions, Princeton High School.
Yes, these are recommendations made by teachers, committee, also department chairs, CIA, and you see here there's different changes to whether it's title or the verbiage within the course, but all these are NCAA-approved courses and modifications.
The city of Cincinnati has a Chamber of Commerce. Yet and still, there's still a need for an African-American Chamber of Commerce. Yet and still, there's still a need for an Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. I say that to say that I have a little concern about changing and removing the words African American and Latino experience from the title of the contemporary literature course. Considering the population of this beloved school district is very largely composed of Latino and African American students, and considering the cultural diversity and value of one's culture is tantamount to one's self-esteem, I would hope that we continue to call the course Contemporary Literature, African American and Latino Experience. I am not happy with the proposed language of just calling it multicultural literature. We all come from a lot of different cultures, and each culture is equally important. But I think in this case, with the watering down of education throughout this country, it's important, especially at Princeton, considering our value of diversity, that we keep the name African American and Latino experience. And if one by chance feels that that's too specific, I am very open to having Native American experience and whatever other culture, because I value all of them. I just think those two particular cultures are tantamount to our district because that's the makeup of most of our student population.
And I would just say that the people who work very hard on the different changes, the people that work with kids day in, day out, that get student input on this, would want to be as inclusive as possible and not exclusive of people specifically related to multiculturalism, which is the recommendation of changing it instead of being specific to actually being able to be more inclusive, which actually is in our equity plan and our strategic plan.
It's the equivalent of someone saying, don't use the Black Lives Matter sign, just say all lives matter. Everybody knows all lives matter, but there is a specific need in terms of making sure African American and Latino children understand their culture. And that is why I'm saying what I'm saying. But I know it's just discussion right now.
I understand the view, and also would want to know a little bit more about particularly why, particularly when we're dealing with a district where we have a majority in terms of the kids that we represent. I don't want to lose sight that the kids that we represent need to have more understanding about their own culture. And so this was a way to do that. If we go multicultural, I guess I get concerned that will we then no longer provide African-American authors or Hispanic authors or the other things that were listed as part of this, and it becomes, you know, German heritage or some other heritage, which again, yes, we need to also provide that, but maybe provide that in a different format. So I would want to hear a little bit more about why we're changing it, particularly now as our district is demographic is completely shifted.
Yeah, and again, I would just say that this is a recommendation by the teachers, the department chair, the people who have worked with our students, who listen to our students every day, which none of us do other than the teachers that are there. And they specifically are the ones that came up with this to be more inclusive, because again, not that we're saying that they're still not going to explore the African American, Latino heritage and all that, but we're being more inclusive. And again, that's what education should be. We just had our Inclusive Schools Week, where we celebrated and we did all that stuff. And again, the teachers feel very strongly about this. Latia was the one that submitted this, and is the works very closely again with the students.
Yeah, I just would like to hear a little bit more about why. I mean, again, as we look at the district, you know, because we have to be mindful that our district is changing, and so, or has changed. Mm-hmm. And with that change, I don't want us to lose sight that oftentimes these two groups are typically underrepresented when it comes to classroom information. So I don't want us to now kind of go backwards a little bit in terms of pushing out information that could be helpful to the very two groups that are significant within our district.
Well, everybody's significant.
No, and I don't mean that others aren't, but
yeah.
to your point, I guess I don't look at it as exclusion or inclusion. I look at it as who we represent. And so I'm not, this is not to say that others don't matter. I said from the front, you know, maybe we can look at a different type of programming that can also look at other cultures, but I don't want to take away something that if it's working, again, I'd like to hear more about as to why now and why are we changing it.
Yeah, we'll be glad to get more additional information.
Yeah,
we'll see if Latia can come to make the presentation.
Here's a very simple question. Has the course content changed?
Yes.
Yeah.
Of course.
So basically, This isn't a modification. We're dropping a class and introducing another class.
The course description changes, that's
No,
all.
no, no, what I'm saying is, if this is not just a title change, this is a curriculum change.
Oh, yeah, when you
They're
look at
changing the course.
so contemporary literature in and of itself is contemporary literature. The second part of that, and then the description has changed. Is
So
the
it's not a-
recommendations made by the teacher.
No, that's fine, but it's not a modification. It's a drop one, we're creating another. Now, whether that's valuable, I'm gonna leave that to you guys, but I'm just saying that we're kinda mixing things up here by saying that it's the same, we're just gonna call it something different. But if it's a new class, new content, different content, then it may be justifiable or may not be, but it's certainly not the same. And therefore, where it says current language and proposed new language, we should say current, actually, we just say we're dropping this and we're bringing something else on board.
Yeah,
I think it's because of contemporary literature, so that in and of itself is the course which gets NCAA qualified.
Yeah, but if I look
That's,
at
that,
all.
we're not, I know I look like Eugene Smith, but I'm not with the NCAA, I'm just with Princeton. And if you're gonna change the course, you're not just changing the language, you're changing everything, even if it's under contemporary literature. I appreciate the sensitivity to NCAA, but I think it may be okay, and it may be good to change it, I don't know, but I'm just saying that it's a different course, therefore it's not a swap.
I would agree
We'll
because
we'll have Latia
If you look
see
at-
if she can come here, and we'll take it, we'll get the specifics.
yeah.
Yeah, well, if
behind
you
that
look
as
at
well.
the fact that under each of the other modifications, there were words or portions of it that got changed. This one, the whole thing is changed.
Yeah.
So it makes it like it's a whole new course.
Which
But
might be
again,
fine.
I just want to understand why now?
Yeah.
I mean, why do we think this is important to do this
Yeah.
now?
You took out slave narratives, you took out Reconstruction, you
But
took out
everything's
the
Because
Harlem Renaissance,
It's a new class.
the Harlem heritage culture.
We didn't take, that doesn't mean that we took it out. That
Oh,
means
it's just not in the
description.
description anymore.
Right.
And as a professional trainer, I know that when I do descriptions for a course, and I mention what's covered in the course, that is gonna be a large element of the course. Afro-Latino experience, not there anymore.
Well, again, the people that work with the students are the ones that made the recommendation, but as I mentioned, we'll have, see if Latia can come here, or we'll at least get her words and we'll make the presentation.
Thank you for listening.
Sure.
I just have one more question. I noticed some of the courses went from being named honors courses to AP courses. Why that change?
If you go to Mike.
Yes,
Yep.
pre-calculus in particular.
Pre-calculus, I believe, is the only one that's being changed to that. They're adding an AP component that was not there prior to this
Oh, I
year.
see.
And since it is the same students that would typically qualify for honors, we're just changing it and making it a more rigorous class to align with the new curriculum that's out there now.
That's wonderful. Thank you for explaining.
You're welcome.
Anything else?
Yeah, I could have one more, I'm sorry.
Okay, well,
And it's probably because of my ignorance when it comes to education, but it looks like you deleted a course called Intensive Language Arts Intervention. Is that probably because that's covered in another area already?
Well, that's the next discussion.
Oh, I'm sorry, my
You're
bad.
ahead. That's middle school, I think you're referring to.
I'm
right,
jumping
Gina?
too far, sorry.
Okay, no, that's okay.
I'll be
I just want to
patient.
make sure we're okay.
Anything else? The next item is first reading 2023-2024 Polaris additions, modifications, deletions at Princeton Community Middle School.
Yeah, so Gina, to your question again, this is one of the things we pride ourselves in making sure that the people who work closely with the students and look at all this, that actually look at this all the time. I mean, it's easy to kind of look at it once a year or twice a year and ask a lot of questions, but they made the recommendation because they felt like that class was no longer necessary.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Mr. Burton,
Yes, sir.
back to the high school a little bit. The changes to some of the CCP says that it's limited seating. Is there a
Yeah.
way to increase seating if we get an increased interest from students?
Well, it's limited because of the number of staff that we currently have. And then, so within that, and obviously with a lot of discussions we're going to have coming up soon with the COVID cliff, now is actually not a good time to look at adding anything, any classes. But, so the issue could be, kids can always take CCP, but they can't necessarily take it here.
Okay.
So that's the advantage of having so many, what do we have, 20-plus teachers that have the license to be able, and the certification to be able to teach college classes here. And that's one of the reasons why we have so many kids that take that. So it's limited seating here, but they could go somewhere else. But then they kill time driving to and from and so forth. Or even if it's online, the time colleges don't necessarily always match up with our bell schedule here. So it may kill 2 bells to get one class, and then the kids don't have the options that they really need and want.
But we would still allow it, correct?
If they were going to choose to go outside, then yes.
Could you add that where it says limited seating on PHS campus?
Well, those would be done specifically with the individual conversations with the guidance counselors when they go through the whole process. This whole scheduling, again, it is arduous.
We've heard stories, good and bad, but what I'm really saying is, the way it's currently written, it seems like you can't take it at all if it's already consumed by upperclassmen or those needing credits, or you're late to the game. And so, but that's not a true statement, because you could still go to UC Blue Ash or whatever. But it doesn't say that anywhere.
We could put whatever language in there. I mean, I hope the kids read it. That would be awesome. The individual conversations with counselors, that's where all this stuff all happens.
Get my daughter's schedule together.
That's good. Sure.
That,
We could look to make any change.
that College Credit Plus program is so dynamic. It's just so outstanding that
Game changer.
you offer the class here. And then is there like a max, like 25 students or less, or is there like a maximum number? I don't know, whatever it is.
It's all based on how many sections are offered.
Okay,
Right.
I see. Yeah, I just have to constantly repeat the story of my friend Tanya Lewis, whose daughter graduated from Princeton as a sophomore in college. And it was through your College Credit Plus program, which is just so outstanding. But a lot of students are taking advantage of it, I hope.
They are.
Thank you.
Anything else? Next is academic update.
Yes, one of the great strategies that we use is what's called instructional rounds. I'm going to call up Tom Cendere and Libby Stiles to do a brief presentation on instructional rounds, what that actually means. I'll pass out the PowerPoint to you, or the Google slide.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Here you go.
Do we have enough there?
No, we're one short. Here. Take those 3.
You want to share?
Thank you.
We got enough here?
Now we have enough. We're good. Otherwise, I was going to come and sit closer.
Well, that's what I said.
Good, okay. Good evening. I will briefly talk about the process and the purpose of why we do instructional rounds, and then Mr. Zendri will share some of the data that we've collected and how we use some of that data. So the process is that all principals, instructional coaches, district administrators, and then in many of our buildings, a lot of the members of the building leadership team will participate in instructional rounds, and it's designed to monitor the effective research-based practices that we have in the classroom based on the 7 key practices that have been selected. Data from these instructional rounds, which Mr. Zendry will share momentarily, will guide decisions on future professional development based on the data that we find. It will help determine what the needs are based on the results that we receive, and we evaluate those not only quarterly, but then also at the end of the year to help develop our future PD. The next slide just shows the connection between both the strategic plan and the district equity plan. And then this slide talks a little bit about the purpose. The purpose of the practice is to establish and maintain a common language of effective evidence-based instruction with all teachers pre-K through 12. And then the 7 key instructional practices selected for this process were developed by our building and district leadership team members using an equitable classroom practice resource. And then Mr. Zendry will share some of the data.
So on this slide, what we're looking at is we're comparing quarter 1 and quarter 2, but I want to caution you with the data. Just because depth of knowledge number 4, which is extended thinking, looks like teachers don't see it, there's a reason for that. So this is really, or as people are doing instructional rounds, they don't see it as much. There's a reason for that. This is really high-level critical thinking, and it's not appropriate to be seen every single time. So really what we're using these numbers for are to guide discussion among instructional coaches, building leadership teams, building administrators, to talk about, okay, what does this mean? Is it okay that we don't see it very often? So it's not necessarily a bad thing that it only shows up that many times. Go ahead, next slide. The key instructional practices, we really as a district are looking at key practice number 5, which is student talk exceeds or equals teacher talk. The whole goal of that is students creating knowledge for themselves. So things like cooperative learning, things that we're really focusing on as a district. These key instructional practices were determined by a district-wide team prior to COVID. And so instructional rounds have, during COVID, were almost non-existent or really difficult to do. And so we've really put a focus on this year increasing the numbers. Over the course of the first 2 quarters, and the second quarter is not done, we've averaged already over 800 instructional round visits per quarter throughout the district. Next slide. The real key here, the last bullet, the goal is improving teaching. So it's getting teachers, staffs, building leadership teams to talk about the data and use that to change the way we teach. Thank you.
And
Can you give me an example of student talk is equal to or exceeds teacher talk?
Oh, sure. When you're visiting a classroom,
That's not chaos.
absolutely.
Oh,
When
not at
students
all.
are working
It's
together,
wonderful.
sure. Students are working together, talking to each other.
Hey, just ask the question.
Absolutely. What you don't want to see is the teacher leading constantly all the time.
Yeah.
So students are involved in creating that knowledge for themselves. So working with each other, partners, working in cooperative groups, all that kind of stuff.
And I would say, too, that one of the biggest strategies, too, is that whole wait time. So a lot of times if we're teaching, if students don't know the answer right away, a teacher, just like I did right there with that
Bring a
pause,
pause.
right? It can be a little bit uncomfortable, but our teachers do a really, really good job. And we want to be in classrooms more. Our principals are in classrooms all the time. So the big question, and this is what we've talked about before, is when you're in there, what are you doing? And that is really it. So the CIA team has done an excellent job. They actually have CIA meetings in different buildings right before they do instructional rounds or right after, and they do this deep embedded work. It's hard in education to say this specific instructional skill or technique, this drove all the change. This drove, when we went from 4 or 594 or whatever it is all the way down to 11th in the entire state with growth. There's a whole lot of variables that control that. We believe that increasing the amount of times that we're in the classrooms will do that. And the consistency of language and what we're looking for, and the teachers continuing to do a great job, and that whole conversation that the teachers have around it we believe that is a variable that will lead to greater growth. And we've seen that. And so when you look quarter over quarter, some of the details, like I believe the second level, right? That's what it was. Yeah, the DOK2 skill building, when you look at that, so we saw a decrease in the recall and an increase in the skill building. We want to continue to see that across the board, but as Mr. Sendre so aptly put, you're not going to see that all the time, and these instructional rounds are shorter in nature. Once we see the information, we're in and out. It's not like we stay there for a whole 45 minutes or 40 minutes, whatever. Once we see the information, we leave. And Libby, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that?
Just to elaborate a little bit more on the student talk exceeding teacher talk, one of the examples that I see teachers regularly using is they'll either have 2 students at one given table, or they will push 2 tables together and have 4 students there, and then break them up into different parts. So if there's 2 students at a table, you might be student A, you might be student B, and the teacher will say, okay, at this point, for the next 30 seconds, student A is going to share their answer. And then when the 30 seconds is up, okay, now, for the next 30 seconds, student B is going to share their answer. And it's providing more opportunities for students to talk at one given time and share their ideas, as opposed to me just being the teacher and saying, okay, Ms. Cleveland, I would like for you to share your answer, and that's only one person being able to share their answer. In those situations, half of the class or a quarter of the class or 100% of the class are able to share their answers at one given time, allowing for more participation, which will give the teachers a better idea to gauge the level of understanding. So those are the practices that we're working on with our district leadership team this year.
And then on top of that, when we go through and we may, not necessarily instructional rounds, but we'll go through and we'll just visit classrooms. The number one thing we always do is, by and large we always do, is we say, oh, what are you working on? To kids. Our kids know what they're doing. Like that, again, if you go back 10 years, and Mary, you remember maybe even longer than that, right, when we would go around, if you would ask that question, the kids wouldn't know. And that's why this work is so critical, and why I applaud the CIA team and the principals and the teachers for the great work that they're doing, really kind of jumping into this, because we need to continue to see the growth for our students to maximize all the opportunities our students have. Thank you.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it sounds like that point number 5, where you've got the student talk equal to or exceeding teacher talk, shows the exchange and the Paideia critical thinking process that not only will the teacher exhibit, but the student sort of works through by watching the teacher do it. Is that it? Yeah. So do they change up teaching styles every 15 minutes or so? I mean, I know they're not doing death by PowerPoint, but I'm just, but it's like, I don't know how long the average class is. Maybe it's at least 45 minutes?
Yeah, it depends on what level, right? So elementary, they do different blocks. They have much more flexible scheduling at the elementary level than at the middle and high school, because we're on the bell schedule.
Do they have master teachers anymore?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
but I can tell you that was just coming in at the end of my teaching career, and that was one of the best things ever. And the kids loved it, and they worked harder so that the next time the principal came in the room, they would look even smarter. So that just really made a difference back in the day. It's been 11 years. Okay. Anything else on academic update?
No, thank you.
Okay, treasurer's report.
2 quick hits. We are up to our eyeballs in the audit. Yes, they finally
They came.
started. The schedule's been a little bit behind this year. I have to assume that they too are having problems finding staff. But they're active in Princeton now, and we've been spitting out information left and right, and the goal still is to be complete by 12/31. So that's the goal. My gut says we might see an extension. So I'll report that if that happens. If not, I'll have an audit for you. You each have a new red folder. There's a couple updated board, or potential board updates, policy updates in there with regards to communication. So I would suggest we plan on doing some discussion on this topic at a work session at some point. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for keeping us in such good shape. Mr. Burton?
Thank you. A couple of very quick things. Just as a reminder to all the parents that may be listening, January 11th for elementary schools, we're going to have some professional development. So stay tuned for additional information, but we'll be doing asynchronous learning on January 11th for elementary students. And again, stay tuned for more information. It's really critical if you're not getting all calls, you need to make sure your information is accurate. You could always call central office and we'll be able to walk you through that process if need be. But accurate phone numbers are critical. So if you change your phone number for whatever reason, please make sure you notify the school, and you can do that also through final forms. I do have a presentation that Gene Sparks put together, and this is absolutely fascinating. I would love to talk more about instructional design. I would love to talk more about instructional methodology. I'd love to talk more about creating more opportunities for kids. I tell you what, every once in a while we talk more about what kids are eating, the small percentage of time that the kids are in school over the course of an entire year. Our kids are not getting out of shape. They're not doing that stuff because of what's happening in school. I'm going to push out all the parents. I'm telling you, it's the meals that they eat late at night and what they're eating on the weekends and so forth. Because in school, any food that is served has to meet specific requirements. And let me give you a couple facts here. When you look at fast food burgers, so if you look at McDonald's cheeseburger, which I particularly enjoy, it's 300 calories, but the sodium intake is 720 versus our Princeton cheeseburger, which is 420. So when you look specifically at sodium intake, and a Wendy's burger is over 1,000. So when you look at the amount of sodium that's taken in different locations, and this flipped me out beyond belief, because one of my favorite all-time things to eat is Chick-fil-A.
Oh, yeah.
Sodium, 1,350. So when you look at what the kids are eating here and what they're eating outside here, when you look at healthy, our kids are eating healthy food in here. Now, they may not always like it because salt is awesome. I love salt. I do. Maybe because I had too much fast food at some point in my life, but when you look specifically at that, it's pretty incredible. When you look at protein, when you look at like our traditional pizza that we offer, our fat and saturated fat is less than some of the big, Domino's and Marco's and so forth. The sodium significantly less, the carbs less, and the protein actually more in 3 of the 4 that we surveyed, that we looked at. So Gene's going to do kind of an in-depth presentation to talk a little bit about like what's community eligibility, what do we have to do, what's this whole big hubbub. We actually looked at additional school districts contiguous to us. So we looked at Mason, Sycamore, and Lakota. We looked at the cost of all the different meals. We haven't had a cost increase in forever. Now we have a lot of money. Actually, we do, but we can't touch that for anything other than food service, unfortunately, because that would be nice. But we look specifically at the whole child as we look at nutrition. But again, I'm saying that, we have some zealots, every community has, that are all over this country. And when you look at that, it's easy to blame the schools. It is not the schools that's serving all this crazy food where kids are getting, out of shape or whatever. So I have this PowerPoint presentation for you, and Gene will be at one of the upcoming meetings to kind of talk about this in greater detail, because it is fascinating to look at. We actually have surveys that are out. Tomorrow they're going out to our students, to kind of get a little bit of a student voice in there, talking about food. We're actually going to have samplings for the students, because obviously we want students to eat the healthiest, best food that they could eat. But I'm going to push all the board members and Treasurer Petter. I mean, I remember like Brussels sprouts as a kid. Come on. Who on earth, like, now Brussels sprouts are
they're
outstanding. You want to know why?
They're caramelized.
Because they caramelize them, and what else do? They put salt on them.
They do?
It's amazing. But this is what happens. So we are actually looking at the whole child. We're really trying to delve down deeper in that. The other thing, too, as we move forward in this school district, we have a lot of big decisions that we have to make coming up. And we know that this summer we did this great big deep dive into Brene Brown's great work, Dare to Lead. We talked about rumbling with vulnerability. We also took a look before, and we did a deep dive through video work, but also some people through a book study, is the Infinite Game, Simon Sinek's work. And so I'm going to pass this out to the board, because this district cannot afford to think in a finite way. And I know I said that, and Chris Petter's right next to me, and she's like, well, there's only a finite amount of money that we have. So you're right, but the ideas we have and how we process information, we have to think in an infinite way. And this is this great book, The Infinite Game by Simon Sinek. So I have one for Treasurer Petter and the other board members. I would just encourage you over the next several months to get through it. It's a very, very quick read. It is a great read that's going to challenge us to perhaps think a little bit different.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Did you sign it?
I did not, nor did Simon Sinek. Neither one of us signed it. I could sign Simon Sinek, but it's not him. Thank you. That is all for my report.
Thank you for the book.
Okay. And do we have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
Thank you, Gina. I thought we were going to spend the night. It has been moved and seconded. Mrs. Petter?
Mrs. Whiter?
Yes.
Mr. Simons?
Yes.
Mrs. Cleveland? Yes. Mrs. Moore?
Yes.
Mrs. Kessler?
Yes.
Thank you. We are adjourned.